Council meeting this evening. Muchly appreciated on June 11th of 2024. I appreciate your attendance here tonight. We'll begin our meeting by hearing from Council Member Barker.
Perfect. Just YouTube repeating.
All right, we have the pleasure of hearing from Councilmember Barker this evening. He'll determine if he'd like to give an invocation, a thought, or both, and then he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
We'll start off with an invocation. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we could gather tonight. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to discuss the city, North Ogden city business, and we're grateful for the opportunity to discuss the budget. And please bless us that as we're going through the budget tonight, that we'll have prudence and that we'll make right decisions for our city. Please bless that we'll be mindful of our residents and that we'll take their interest in as we're going through tonight. And these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. We appreciate that. We have several presentations this evening. We'll start. Chief, you have any other family coming tonight? Would you like us to defer and go with the other presentation first? Okay, thank you. We have with us tonight Margaret Rose. She's the director of the YCC here, and she's going to talk to us about what's going on there and how our city uses the facility. She's got about 10 minutes or so, 10 or 15 minutes. And so Rose.
Mayor, City Council, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. As Mayor Brube said, I'm the Executive Director at YCC Family Crisis Center in Ogden. We are the, let's see, that's not quite coming on. All right, who's your tech person?
This guy. He's working on it.
I just was waiting to make sure you had it up so
Oh,
it didn't
great.
show your
Okay.
screen
Thanks,
without.
John.
Let's see.
While that's loading, YCC Family Crisis Center is the domestic violence and sexual assault service provider for Weber and Morgan counties. And so throughout the state, there are 16 different shelters or domestic violence service providers. We each have a geographic region that we cover. So there's a provider in every county, or excuse me, that covers every county statewide. And we all work really, really closely together. We're all separate, independent, nonprofit organizations, but we have a really strong network and coalition. And so we work really, really well together. You're kind of, caught in between like CAPSA in Logan and New Hope in Brigham City and YCC in Ogden and, Peace House and Safe Harbor. Those are all kind of our northern Utah providers. So see if I can, maybe it's not you, John, it's probably me. That sounded more promising.
Let me try going.
Keep pressing with that.
This one. you want to try the podium and see if it's working, Bryce? Then the other thing, sometimes it's a refresh rate on the screen.
I hate to shut it down. It takes forever to, I mean, it doesn't take forever. But...
Because remember, that's what, oh, there we
Oh,
go.
there we go.
In conclusion.
Right, that was fast.
There we go.
Okay. A little blurry, but we'll do it. Okay. I wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of what has been happening over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of crime and some of the services that we provide at YCC. Gratefully, this city council and this city have been really supportive of YCC over the years. So I think you're all fairly familiar with what's going on and kind of the services that YCC provides and the support that we have for the residents. And so first of all, thank you for the support over the last, I think you've been contributing to YCC for like the last 6 or 7 years, at least that we have on record. And so I greatly appreciate that partnership and just wanted to talk with you tonight about kind of what we're trying to do in terms of the organization, ensuring that our services remain, frankly. So over the last 5 years, this is kind of a snapshot, 6 years actually, a snapshot of violent offenses in Weber County. And I apologize if some of these stats and some of the things we're going to talk about this evening are traumatizing or triggering for people. We'll try to get through it without causing too much collateral damage here. But in the county, in terms of violent offenses, you'll see that these are the top 6: aggravated assault, fondling, rape, robbery, sexual assault with an object, and sodomy. YCC deals with all of the victims of these crimes. So law enforcement, and grateful that we have such strong law enforcement partners in this community. They deal with the perpetrators. We deal with the victims of all of these violent offenses. Not so much robbery, although I will say that robbery plays a big role also as kind of a co-crime, along with particularly domestic violence, of a lot of financial abuse and flat out robbery. So as we, over the last year, we have been working with the lethality assessment program statewide. And this is because it finally went into effect as a law July 1. Now, law enforcement in Weber County have been using the lethality assessment tool for quite some time. But that hasn't been the case for the rest of the state or even the rest of our county, the cities within our county. So it's a tool that law enforcement officers use when they're responding to a domestic violence call. They interview the victim. And if the victim answers affirmatively to one of these 9 or 11 questions, if they answer affirmatively, they get a score. Really, if they answer affirmatively to like 2 or 3 of the questions, it's an automatic referral to YCC. Or if it happens to be in St. George, it's an automatic referral to the Dove Center, and so on throughout the state. So what it does is it kind of takes the subjectiveness out of it for our law enforcement partners, and it's highly effective. It's been used for over 20 years. It's evidence-based and has a great track record of reducing both assaults and homicides when administered. Because it connects victims to resources and support in the community and hopefully gets them either out of that relationship or helps them provide, safety planning and so on, counseling, that sort of thing, where they can move on. So what has happened since, well, we can go on here and I'll show you. So in last year's legislative session, once the LAP became law, or once the LAP was passed through the session, many of our law enforcement partners started using the LAP just kind of because they're like, well, July 1, we have to use it. So we might as well start using it now, getting used to it and so on. So in May and June, statewide, we saw 1,882 LAPs that were administered statewide. Starting in July, when it became required, we saw 1,166 LAPs. In all of 2022, there were just over 4,500 LAPs administered statewide. So you can see the difference that it made once it became law. We didn't have this major explosion of domestic violence in the state. What we had was a major explosion of getting people connected to resources. And so those referrals statewide have really taken off, frankly. What you'll see on the right hand, and I apologize, that's a little bit blurry. On the right hand is you'll see about, in this case, I think it's about, this says 71%. The next slide will show you a little bit better. It's about 64% are considered high potentially lethal referral, and about a third not potentially lethal referral. And so we have seen that play out in July, in August, in September, in October. I'm not going to I didn't build you a pie chart for every month, but it is about 2/3 of the LAP referrals are deemed potentially high risk for lethality. This is kind of a snapshot of what some of the victims tell our law enforcement partners. So, and these are actual numbers. So just in July, 243 victims were threatened with a weapon. Over 300 victims said that their aggressor threatened to kill them or their children. They also believe that their aggressor is capable and would kill them. And 37% said that the aggressor had tried to choke them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then nearly 400 said the aggressor had a gun or could easily get one, and that's also obviously a pretty significant factor when it comes to lethality. Strangulation is one of the huge red flags that we see with as a precursor to lethality. So if a victim has been choked or strangled by their partner, it is almost without question that person has said, I have the capability and I will kill you at some point. It is a huge factor in lethality. And so we take the strangulation piece of that very, very seriously. And our staff is actually trained to do the examinations for strangulation, and we do those on site with our law enforcement partners. And we're, I think the main thing that we see is that even if there aren't external injuries, strangulation also has really long-term significant health consequences to it. So just, I wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of in 2023, we served just over, well, about 2,200 individuals residing in Ogden City, and then another 1,750 throughout the rest of the county, Weber and Morgan counties. And I'm going to, there's a caveat to these data. So, and I'll get to that here in just a second. So obviously population wise, Ogden has the highest population, and we serve the most people who indicate that Ogden is their primary home, followed by Roy, West Haven, and then North Ogden at 119. So 119 individuals who indicated that North Ogden was their residence at the time of their victimization. Now, here's the caveat. We are not required, and in fact, our grants in some cases that largely fund us preclude us from requiring people to disclose their personal information. We're a no barrier. If you have an issue, we will help you regardless. So people either don't disclose don't want to disclose where they live. A lot of times that's because they feel like their abuser will get arrested. They might get deported. They might get sent back to prison themselves, or their family and friends will know that they're in this situation. So they're highly, highly secretive about their victimization often. And so while we have these data that show, and you can see like Ogden and then other cities on the bar graph, the 10,000 plus services that we provide those are all unknown addresses. And so I think it's a fair assumption that probably if we took those 10,000, that they would probably fall somewhere along that same distribution of those who did disclose. But I think that's a fair assumption, but I'm not ready to make that. I have worked with our staff without coercing people or requiring people, obviously, I'm trying to impart to them that the importance of gathering that information if they can, so that we do have better data to share with the cities. In terms of cities outside of Ogden, again, you can just kind of see compared to the other cities where North Ogden falls in terms of individuals served. And this is, again, all of last year. And then laps by police department. And so North Ogden is the kind of pale white there in the middle, I believe, of the laps that were administered. And so I think it's around 25, if I'm not mistaken. It's fair. One point to make is that we serve many, many, many victims who don't ever get a lethality assessment. So they walk in, they're referred from the hospitals, they're referred from family and friends. They just, they're referred from other agencies and so on. So the laps represent certainly a portion of, and usually, not always, but usually the more severe of our referrals, the more serious of our referrals. Obviously, police have been called, so it's generally pretty serious. Since July, across the state, our domestic violence service providers have seen an increase in referrals by 86%. So especially for those communities where the law enforcement agencies were not using the LAP, when they started using it, the providers were really kind of overrun. It's really good though, because what we see is 70% of individuals who are being referred are actually engaging with services. And that's significant. That's a big number and a really positive result of the LAP referrals. At YCC, we've seen 74% of our folks being referred, actually engaging with our services. And the vast majority of people who have never engaged with any sort of victim services at all. So this is the first time that they're really like, realizing like, hey, this isn't the norm. I can get help. There is hope out there. I can get some help with my kids, with myself, whatever. So just kind of give you a snapshot. We generally go somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 crisis calls a year. That's generally where we're at. Last year, we did over 14,000 shelter nights. So we have a 61-bed crisis shelter. Most people stay somewhere between 30 and 45 days. We have domestic violence classes, support groups, therapy classes. We also have 4 victim advocates who help people navigate the judicial system if that's what they're choosing to do, getting protective orders, and helping with crime victim reparations if that's appropriate, and getting safety plans in place, and then thousands of meals, which we also have a childcare program and a Head Start program on site. So, in addition to our shelter services, we serve a lot of meals. Some things that you can expect from YCC and that you've already taken advantage of in certain cases, or the LAP training for officers. We have a LAP coordinator at our office who knows the LAP inside and out, and helps train, especially newer officers as they're sort of onboarding and they're new in their role. The reason that, kind of some of the dynamics of domestic violence, it's kind of an unusual and tricky, and as we know, very, very dangerous response for our law enforcement partners. So that a training both from the law enforcement side, but also understanding the dynamics, which our staff does, is really helpful. And then, of course, the support for victims. We have 24/7 response on scene. And as I mentioned, the strangulation exams, protective order assistances, and then obviously shelter and support for victims. So we know that when we connect victims to services, that we can decrease the calls that our law enforcement partners go out on. A lot of the calls that they go out on are repeat calls to the same address. Those tend to also be the ones that escalate, get very violent and volatile. And so when we can get victims connected to services, generally, we can decrease that number of repeat responses, and that eases the burden on law enforcement. And we also know that we can decrease the number of assaults and homicides by getting victims connected to services. So those are really key times at the time when victims are leaving their abusive partner, or in the 2 weeks following. It's actually 2 years, but acutely the 2 weeks following are the most dangerous times for victims to leave those relationships. So one of the things that we've been trying to do in order just to help manage our increase in services, making sure that we're providing the support that we can throughout the county, is that we're trying to, and also just the demand on everything, food, shelter, therapy, case management, all of that. I'm trying to add another $150,000 to our budget. And what that looks like is, and I divided it out based on population of all of the cities in the county. So in the past, North Ogden has contributed $8,000 to YCC in that to support this type of partnership. This year, in looking at that, and especially for us, just trying to keep pace with the population growth. And I know you all know this because you're doing the same thing here with the city budget. I think we're all in the same boat. North Ogden City makes up 8.11% of the population. These data came from the county, so if they're wrong, it's the county. So that would be 12,161 would be the amount that we would hopefully look for, request in that partnership. Some other cities have done it through a police services agreement, and that has worked out well. It's actually in the police budget, in terms of we view ourselves as sort of an extension of city services, an extension of sort of law enforcement services. And so that has worked out well to embed it, but certainly other cities have just had us invoice them. And I actually don't recall the mechanism for North Ogden and what we've done. You probably do. But together, I think if we can strengthen our services, strengthen our relationship with law enforcement in the city, I really do feel like we can build a really strong infrastructure of safety and support for victims, where they don't really have. They do have it, but I would say that we don't have it at the level that we need, and especially as we grow, we're struggling to keep up with the demand for services. So I appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness on this.
Rose, not that it has a big bearing, but are you finding participation from most cities then?
Yeah, it's been mixed. I mean, honestly, I think this is my 6th council visit, not including Ogden, because we're already on board with Ogden. I I think this is my sixth council visit. I think everybody seemed really receptive. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm sure, they're all crunching the numbers, doing their budget like you all are. And then others they're like, nah, we're good. And truthfully, and I told Mayor this as well, whether you choose to sort of put some resources toward this or not, YCC, we have our 80th anniversary next year. We're here. We're not going anywhere, and we're going to provide support for the people who need it. But we need some help doing it. So that's in full transparency,
All right, thank you very much.
so.
I know, as I've talked to the chief and some of the officers, domestic violence calls are pretty high risk. I think Officer Lady he was on a domestic violence call when he got shot. And we've seen some recently, just down the road here. So any questions for Rose? Councilmember Pulver?
I thought this was awesome, by the way, so thank you. I appreciate it. The one question I did have is that, do you also do mental health stuff, or is that, is it part of it, or?
So it's definitely intertwined. There's no
Okay.
doubt. We see a huge amount of addiction, sometimes forced, because then you're easy to control if you're addicted. So addiction is definitely part, or substance abuse is definitely part of the dynamic in domestic violence and sexual assault. So we work really closely with MCOT, with Weber Human Services. We don't have addiction services on our site, but we do have a really good relationship. We try not to be all things to all people. So we stay kind of in our lane, and we work with the people who are experts in addiction and recovery. But yeah, it's definitely an issue. And then in terms of mental health services, same thing with Weber Human Services, but we also have 2 full-time therapists on site. They have a huge waiting list. I just lost one to the open market because, they can make a lot more in private practice. So, but yeah, we do to as much as we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Rose? We will be discussing the budget tonight, Rose, and we have talked about it in our preliminary budget. I think council, just my opinion is this, as Rose said, is an extension. These are the things we talked about that provide safety in our community. And Rose, just so you're aware, in case you can get the word out, knowing the situation, our chief and the design of the building here, the vestibule out here, if someone is in need, they can come to that. The door is always open. They can lock themselves in and press
Oh,
for
that's
help.
great.
So there is a safe place here for those. We're having a little difficulty getting the word out, but that's available here. And I know our chief, who's now retiring, and our new chief, I'm sure, feels the same way. Understand the necessity here of taking care of those victims. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do in the community. We know your job is not easy, but we thank you for caring enough to help people. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And also nice, good hire on the new chief.
Thank you. All right. We will now proceed with the recognition of Chief Quinney. If you would come up, Chief. not often you run across a chief like. Is he perfect? No, but he's pretty bad. And humble. I've never been a police chief. I got a feeling it's not really. The presidents that run the leader sometimes it's only the God. But one thing that's really impressed me is when he talks about his officers. He talks about them as his men. I truly believe that's him. That's sometimes why he has to get acting on. Chief's been with us for 28 years, as most of you know. And we're gonna miss him. I've said this before, I'm very sincere. I think that's what life is all about. Got this together. Distinguished Service Award. Always welcome to part of the North Ogden family. Now you can take it to the. You know, we have received a lot of comments about our new chief, but we've also received.
You know how long-winded I am, so I'll keep it short, you know. I just want to thank the community of North Ogden. For the most part, they've been pretty friendly. And it's been a joy to serve them. And I started my career here and never once had a reason to even think about changing that, moving on, going somewhere else. The people of North Ogden have been very supportive of the police department and the officers, and I just want to thank them for that, because it's a tough profession right now. It's not friendly, but North Ogden treats us well. So, and I want the council and the mayor to know that over my 28 years, I've had some kind of relationship with the councils and the mayors, whatever that has been. I've was a little nervous coming into this position because of some of the experiences I've had, and I just want you to know I've been fortunate to work with the council members and the mayors that I've been able to work with in this position. Been very supportive and have made my job easier with that support and friendships, and I just want to tell you thank you for that. I'm gonna miss y'all a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be thinking about us when you're out there fishing and golfing, right? Will be
Well,
top of mind.
Occasionally when I accidentally overslice that golf ball and I say, "Oh, mayor."
All right, you're
Thank you.
entitled to do that. Thanks, chief. All right, as we begin our agenda tonight, you've had a chance to review the packet. Is there any disclosures of potential conflict of interest that anyone on the council would like to make this evening? Okay, we'll move on. We'll now go to item number 4 on our agenda, which is public comments. I would just remind those of you who may be new here tonight, we'd ask you to step up to the podium. We'd ask you to state your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden, you don't have to give us your address, but it'd be very helpful. You could save the mayor some grief if you would limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes. And if by chance you lose track of time, I'll remind you that 5 minutes is up. And so with that, we'll begin our public comments portion of our agenda this evening. So those who would like to make a comment, and John, if there's any online, if you'd let us know. So, because I do think we have 3 or 4 people online.
Philip Swanson, North Ogden City. Grateful for the work that you all are doing with our budget this year. It's by far the most difficult process that you have throughout the year. It's a tough seat to sit in where you are. A lot of balls in the air and a lot of decisions to make, and sometimes those decisions are very difficult. I'm grateful for the continued commitment to our parks and trails. That's a thing that is very wonderful here in North Ogden, and I'm grateful that council continues to be committed to that. I'm grateful to see that over the last couple of years and going through the parks and trails work that will be done this year, nearly $1.9 million will have been spent on parks and trails here in North Ogden. That's pretty dang amazing. And what's even more amazing to me is that a major portion of that has come from RAMP, from developers, from private donations. It isn't all just the taxpayers of North Ogden that have been footing that bill. And when the pond project is finished, that's a $7+ million project, we'll have almost 9, maybe close to $10 million worth of infrastructure, park infrastructure, entertainment for our families that will have been added to North Ogden, with 70-ish% of that coming from sources other than North Ogden, which is a great thing. And I commend the work that's continuing to go on there. Theodore Roosevelt is attributed with saying, "Comparison is the thief of joy." I hope that as we continue to work to improve our city, that we do the best we can with what we have, and that we don't get caught up in comparing ourselves to other communities that have different resources than we do. Recently, we've all heard about Salt Lake City allowing kids 16 and under free entry into their rec centers and everything else. Well, if we had Salt Lake City's revenue stream, I think we would probably do the same thing, but we don't. And so it makes it difficult to do those things. Again, thank you for your commitment to parks, to trails, to the families here in North Ogden. Thank you for your commitment to the taxpayers, and always looking for those resources that are available for us that are something other than the taxpayers' back. I'm grateful. And I wish you the best of luck in making your decisions on the budget tonight. And we'll see where we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Anyone else like to comment this evening? Sir, if you just step up to the podium.
My name is Dennis Spam. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, Mayor and City Council members. I've lived here in North Ogden for 26 years, I believe. My roots are actually from here in North Ogden. My 2 sets of my great-great-grandparents came here from North Ogden. The Montgomerys that named Ben Lone Peak up here, and also another family. Her name was Beletta Monson Johnson. and she and her husband and 4 daughters came from Norway, and they ended up here in North Ogden. But on the way coming across the plains, she lost her husband and one of her daughters. And I'm descended from her youngest daughter, Mina Johnson. And she's buried up here in the Beneloma Cemetery, along with her mother, Beletta. And of course, Mary Wilson Montgomery and Robert Montgomery. My grandmother married one of the Montgomery children, and that's how I got connected with them. The Montgomerys, I understand, lived in a house right just to the north of the canning factory. And then my other family, she married when she got here, she was a widow, and she married a guy named Frederick Levi. They called him Dad Levi. He built a log cabin where the Lindquist Mortuary is now, on the opposite side of Washington Boulevard. And then the family later moved to the other side where the power substation is and built a house there. My mother was born there. My grandmother was born there. And my great grandmother and her mother, I think, lived there. I want to say, I appreciate this magazine. Aunt Ruby. Sorry. I'm wasting my time. I appreciate your inspirational messages in this magazine. I appreciate the fact that you often honor our pioneer ancestors in this magazine. Well, my wife are almost done with compiling a story about the lady that lived in the log cabin where the mortuary is. My cousin's Cindy Montgomery. I think she's the one that does those kind of things, and so I hope that she'll be able to get that and put it in. My grandmother and my mother used to bring me up here on the north side of the south side of the cannery. There was a dirt road. It was a dead end road. Out on that dirt road, there was some wet fields. You got to raise your hand if I get overtime, because
I'll let you know.
It was full of buttercups. When I got older, we took our children out there. They played in those buttercups. They're about this tall. They last forever in water. You can pick them and put them with some iris and take them to the cemetery, and it lasts forever. They're all gone now, though. There's a preserve right over here somewhere. It's full of Phragmites now. Raise your hand if you know what Phragmites is, please. Well, they're an invasive weed that suck up a lot of water, and birds can't even nest in. They're so thick. And they're all around the Great Salt Lake, and they're trying to eradicate them because they suck up so much water and put it in the atmosphere. And the Dyer's woad is similar to that. Raise your hand if you know what Dyer's woad is. Okay, good. That's an invasive species that's practically taken over our county. My son is the weed control officer for Summit County. He's got almost totally eradicated from that county. Well, I'd like to see us do something about those Phragmites right up here in this preserve. I think it's too late to do anything about the buttercups. Also, the intersection of right here by McDonald's. This is a question. When you come down the hill going south, and you want to turn right to go out to the freeway, there's no turning lane there. And I've seen about 6 or 7 cars waiting to come out of Lee's parking lot going east, wanting to turn north. They can't get out. There's no lane. But there's two lanes coming down there to turn left. I had a friend whose property was bought when it was Mayor Taylor's time in the office, and they bought his property up there, and I thought they were gonna put the road up to the light up there, but I noticed a construction man cutting off the sidewalk and making a jet in it out into the road and going up that way. Could I please ask the question, what happened with that?
Yeah, I can answer a couple of them, and then we're getting pretty close to your 5 minutes.
Okay.
So UDOT controls that intersection
Okay.
down here. In the design, they would have had to, the city would probably had to come up, I believe it was several $1 million, John, to buy that property from McDonald's. We have met with UDOT numerous times, trying to get that so we can get a turn lane there. Our engineer is working with UDOT to try to get a solution. So we're working on that one. The road is a plan to be widened up to 3,100. We've got the money from the county and from the city, and that project is scheduled for 2026. That's when we could get the money from the county.
Is that what the light is? The stop
Goes
light?
up to the light. That intersection will be redone. I believe, well, that's a $6 or $7 million project. John, refresh my memory. It was more than I suspected.
I think it might be rounding up to 6. It's $5 million worth of
Yeah.
Weaver money. Yeah.
So that's scheduled for 2026 when the county is allocated money. And yeah, we do own all those homes on the west side up there, and we'll give adequate notice, and the road will be widened up to 3,100.
Okay.
Okay?
Is my time up?
Yep.
Okay, thank you
you-
very much.
But you got 5 minutes again at the end if you want to stick around.
Okay,
All
I
right.
will.
Thank you so much for coming. Brenda, we'll get to you in just a minute. We've got another, we've got a group here that's walking up to the podium, so.
Hello,
Hello.
we live just above 3,100, we're all North Ogden residents, and we just live,
Can you all state your names?
I'm Jackie Summers.
Stephanie Sniggs.
Scott Snicks.
Kirsten Auger.
So it's the North Peak subdivision, and a few years ago in 2021, there was a property at 543 East, 3150 North, it's in a cul-de-sac, that was bought by an investor, or an investor sold to an investor, and it's been turned into an Airbnb, which has been problematic for us as neighbors. I don't know what the city's ordinance, if you have an ordinance with Airbnbs or what you're doing towards Airbnbs. For us as neighbors, it's been hard. Different people every single week. Sometimes different people within the week. I don't know how many calls, and I don't know if you logged these, how many calls to the police department have been called because people are loud, obnoxious. There's not a lot of parking. There's no sidewalks in that subdivision on 3150 North. And so a lot of times I live right next door to it on 557. My mailbox is blocked. I do not get mail. There's been times where there's multiple cars just parked in that area. It's a 2-car garage, I think there's an extra spot for 3 cars, but it's been a problem for us as neighbors, and I don't know what we can do about it. We had an incident recently where the police were involved. There were police there last night. These guys probably have something more to say, but it's frustrating, and I don't know what the city can do about the Airbnbs and people coming in and out all the time, and we just never know what we're going to get from week to week.
Yeah, we have our city attorney with us tonight. If you would like to, John, just give him an overview of the ordinance. I have an Airbnb right below my house, but owner is always on site. And he if there's any rowdiness or something, he asks them to leave. So, but John, you want to give the folks just an overview of what our ordinance is?
Sure. So they technically are allowed. There's certain things that they're required to permit. We don't have any sort of a restriction or any sort of a penalty for police involvement. But that is something the council could consider. There is an off-street parking requirement. I know that I was made aware of a situation I think happened on Sunday night when the officers were up there, and I think that there was a fight in the front yard and some things going on. But it sounds like if the council would be agreeable that bringing this back and an ordinance change is a potential possibility for additional regulations if these are some issues we're seeing at these.
John, didn't the state prohibit us from seeking out Airbnbs through advertisement? I mean, we can't, we have to be made aware of it. We can't go out seeking
So yeah,
through public.
the old rule was we couldn't just look at Airbnb or VRBO and say, okay, those are all the people that are renting rooms or whatever. We had to have some other sort of way we found out. But they've since backed off that a little bit, and you can use that as part of your information. But as, for example, this one is not currently licensed by the city. The business license office was not aware that this was operating, and so they've already started that process of getting them into compliance. But if they had another incident last night, then sounds like maybe there's some things the council should consider, and we really need to look at what we're allowed to under Utah law for those things.
Okay, go ahead.
Two-part question. So is there a way we can document when there is incidents to North Ogden City besides the police department, or is the police department the best active way? And is there an ordinance on how many residents can be in the house? Because right now it's stated on their site that they can sleep up to 12, but there has been many incidents when there's 14, 18 people that are there. We had a family reunion last week that they were taking pictures on the front steps and there was literally 25 people at the house at a time. So is there an ordinance where there is how many people can be at the house?
I don't believe we have an ordinance that addresses that. I don't know if we can or not, but that's something we can look at also.
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts. I've never done this before, so forgive me. I live directly behind the house, and so I get to hear a lot of action. And my kids told me today, they said, oh, I told them I was coming here, and they said, oh, good, that we can go outside without hearing F words and derogatory speech and so forth. There's a hot tub there. As you know, just 2 days ago, there was a marijuana bust at that location as well, and all sorts of different behavior going on there. I have a couple of solutions. I don't know if this could be as options versus, I don't want people to have the same experience that I have because I love North Ogden. Could we limit the amount of Airbnbs within a certain radius of area so other people do not have to have this constant problem? Or could it be where the people who rent or have ownership of the Airbnb be local, so they're not people from California where they're out of touch? Or could there be a fine given to someone who's in charge of, whose ownership of this Airbnb could not be slapped on the hand with a $50 fine, but to make it hurt financially, so it goes back to the community because we're suffering the pain. So could that be something where there's a hefty enough fine that the owner can relay that message of the importance of keeping it a quiet neighborhood?
I think what we can do is John Call, who's at the end here, is our city manager and city attorney. So John, if you would review what we can do, I think we've heard some of the suggestions here. You know, the great thing about it is our new chief lives up in that area, so he could probably, keep an eye on the place there. But yeah, we understand your concern. What John will do is look at, sometimes that's overseen by the state and they tell us what we can do and what we can't do. But what we'll do is review the ordinance, the statute, see what we can do, because it has been a problem in some areas in our city. So we thank you for making us aware of it. We're sorry you're having to go through that, but we will see what we can do to set an ordinance that'll kind of keep the peace, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay?
The only thing I would add is, if there are 25 people there and you've got 5 bedrooms and sleeping for so many people, that's also a safety issue. It's a
Yeah.
fire issue. It's a cul-de-sac issue.
Yeah.
When you've got that many people in a small space, so
Right.
parking, I know other Airbnbs when I've had a larger family that I've wanted to stay places, and you say there's 6 people and more show up, the owner's on site saying, hey, you signed up for 6 people and you've got way more than 6 here. I don't know how to deal with
Yeah,
that.
the good thing you've got going for you is one of our council members is the fire marshal. And I believe to get a license and to have an Airbnb, they have to get an inspection. Is that true, Councilmember Barker?
Correct. But that means they have to get a license. I've not
Yeah.
been to this one.
Yeah, so now that we're aware, our licensed folks are working on it, and I don't know all the rules about fire safety, but there may be restrictions on that. So you have the ear of the fire marshal in the area too, right here. So he'll look into that also now that he's as the licensing comes about. And John, I don't know what we can do if they fail to get a license, if we can prohibit the use of it as without a license.
If for example, the rules changed and they had not been properly licensed, then they wouldn't be grandfathered into any old rules, as an example. But there is a penalty for operating a rental without a license. It's just not very much.
So we might want to look at that also.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much for coming tonight, expressing your concerns. You're always welcome. All right, I think Brenda's had her hand up for quite a while. I don't know if she's. Brenda, do you want to proceed with your comment?
Yes, I do. Brenda Ashdown. I live in North Ogden. Before those people leave, I want to let them know that you guys do a really good job of listening to them. It might take a little while for you to do what needs to be done, but I guarantee you that they do hear you and that they will look into it and help you with your issues. The other thing, I have 2 other things I wanted to say quickly. I'm sorry I'm not there tonight. Needed to be home with my grandson. Had I been there, I would have been able to fix this. I'm so sad that we were not able to hear the mayor's little presentation towards the police chief. And I just want to add to that I think he has been exceptional. My other comment is I saw where recycling is going to be moved. I sent you all an email, but I wanted to say this publicly. I think whoever came up with that idea is a genius. I hope that you can get something figured out for the winter time, but to be able to, I think especially the people who are complaining about the moving are not realizing the amount of garbage that is getting put in those containers that then contaminates that whole truck. If people are sincerely concerned about recycling, it has to be done in the right way. And I appreciate you guys making whatever efforts possible to see that that happens. Thank you.
Brenda, just so you know, Dave was just pounding on his chest when you called him genius.
Good. I'm glad.
Because I think him and John probably came up with the idea, but you know how the sports guys do that when
I
they
can't
dunk it?
see him.
Yeah, well, I'll just explain it to you. He was just kind of pounding on his chest when you use the word genius. But
Okay.
we do
Good job.
appreciate Dave and John coming up with solutions. So
Thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight that would like to comment? Or anyone else online? All right, we'll move on to item number 5. Mr. Call will lead us in this discussion. This is a new statute that was passed in the recent legislature. Yet to know the actual motivation for it. But I guess transparency is good. So John is going to talk to us about an ordinance that will help us comply with this statute. And it's regarding salary adjustments for department heads, basically, and officers of the city, so that the public knows what's going on. So John?
Thank you, Mayor. So council, as the mayor explained, this is a brand new state ordinance. It has caused a tremendous amount of ripples among employees in the state, city employees, because this is a level of transparency that even though everyone's salary numbers are out there, not hard to find, just go to transparency.utah.gov, or anyways, if you look up Utah Transparency, it'll pull it up. But this ordinance essentially requires any city or county to publicly disclose the increase in the salary, the increase in the vehicle allowance, the increase in a bonus, or the increase in a deferred salary, which is essentially thinking of it as a 401k type thing, but a slightly different payment for any of what they call municipal officers. They do specify who they categorize those individuals at, and we've taken their kind of gray description and tried to make it really black and white on our end, and we've just applied it to every individual who's on a salary at the city as opposed to hourly. Those individuals were listed on the ordinance. Let me put it up on the screen for you so we can just talk about it. There's the screen there's something weird with the screen today, because usually it's not this way. So essentially we just have a table that identifies the individuals in the city who would qualify, which are in alphabetical order. The administrative services director / city treasurer / IT person, the assistant city manager / public works director. Then we put the council and mayor in one category. Technically, you don't get paid hourly; it's a stipend. And we felt like it was okay to put you in there. The city manager / attorney, city recorder, city treasurer. We have that in there twice because based on how the council approves the budget, we may be separating that treasurer position out from the first job description we talked about. Then we have the community and economic development director, the finance director, human resource manager, and the police chief. Those are the individuals who are on salary at the city. And then the recommended percentages are in that column. Again, it's hard to see it, so I'm just going to read them out for those online because it's a little weird. But we have also talked about, just prior to this meeting, about potentially any changes to these numbers. But the administrative services director would be a salary increase of up to 3%. The assistant city manager and public works director, as advertised, was up to 1%. City council and mayor was a 0% increase. City manager, city attorney was up to a 6% increase. City recorder was up to 4%. City treasurer was up to 3%. Community economic development director was up to 1%. Finance director was up to 1%. Human resource manager is up to 3%. And police chief was up to 3%. And one thing we talked about was maybe since we're approaching it as an up to number, that we should increase all of those who are less than 3% to an up to 3% number, so that we can keep an eye on the market. And if there's adjustments that we need to be making for those three individuals, we could, obviously with the mayor's involvement. We did not talk about whether or not the council and the mayor should get more than 0%. However, I think you saw the stuff in Salt Lake that it was in the newspapers. The increases they were asking there kind of made the news. So the real question for the council is, this is an ordinance. it has to be approved before the budget can be adopted. And so the council just needs to be aware of the changes. You can make any amendments you'd like. As I mentioned, we've got this other version that shows that the minimum of the individuals listed at 3% or is an up to 3%. And so it's open for discussion. It is worth noting for my position, the city manager and attorney, the contract says I'm entitled to a minimum of the average for all the employees. And then the reason it's at a 6% is that the maximum we established for employees this year was 6%. And the market study we did showed that my position was still a little low, but that's obviously up for council discussion as well. So.
And council, as John mentioned, and I think as all of you are aware, salaries in the city follow the policy that was adopted by the council, which is to pay, the target is to pay all employees at the 50th percentile of the study. The study involves cities of our size within a certain distance. And for those employees that are high performers, they can go up into the 60th percentile. So there is some movement there. So I just want to point out when you saw that some people were getting 1%, it's not because of performance. It's because they were closer to the market than others. I'll save those who view this later or those who are curious now, so they don't have to go look it up. Each council member receives a stipend of $500 a month. Yeah, before taxes. The mayor's stipend is $1,000 a month. I don't know, and I'm not proposing that it be adjusted, but John, I'm not sure the last time that was adjusted. Maybe never in the history of current things. Downgraded. Yeah, the mayor's has been downgraded, and which is fully understandable based upon the performance of the mayor. That's surely makes a lot of sense. But at some point in time, that does need to be addressed because I believe that we're probably on the low end. And I know no one here is serving for that purpose. But my reading of it, John, would say anyway that the city council and the mayor is not subject to this, but I'm glad you put it in there. So do you have any questions for Mr. Call before I look for a motion on this ordinance? Are you okay with this table or do you prefer the previous table?
Yeah, I was going to agree to this version of the table.
Okay, then it looks like we're ready for a motion. This is regarding ordinance 2024-12.
I apologize, Mayor. I forgot to mention this requires a public hearing. So there is a public hearing on this and there will be one on the budget as well.
So would now open the public hearing. If anyone would like to comment either online or those who are present this evening. Thanks for the reminder, John. That is correct. Anyone like to comment during a public hearing? I don't see anyone online. I don't see anyone here. So John, do we need to take a vote to close the public hearing?
Yes.
I look for a vote then to motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Councilmember Pulver. Do we have a second to his motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Dowpaz. Any further discussion or questions? Councilmember Barker.
Just throwing this out there, maybe we should look at council stipends next year on an election year. That might be a great idea. I'm just kidding.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah. Maybe those who aren't running could make the case for those who are. Okay, good comment there, Councilmember Barker.
It's a great comment.
Yeah. All right, then seeing no further discussion, this will be a vote, and all votes tonight. We'll start with Councilmember Severing and work our way down. Councilmember Severing?
We need a motion.
Oh, I thought we had, I'm sorry.
But if you'd like me to motion, I will.
Okay.
I move Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 2024-12 adopting the compensation increases for the municipal officers.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing.
Do you want to say using the 3%?
Using the table here on the screen,
Uh,
the 3%.
Yep, using the table that was presented in city council.
There was two.
Okay.
Saying
Councilman,
there was two that was shown. I've just,
yeah,
one that says 3%.
I thought maybe you were seconding the motion.
Oh, I can second too. Yeah, sure.
Is that
Okay,
clear?
thank you for
Okay.
seconding the motion. Now, is there any discussion?
Just the fact that there was two tables, we just need to
Right.
identify the one that has the 3%.
Yeah,
We approved the blurry one.
The blurry one, I mean, sorry.
okay. I
And
think
John
the
said
one-
we were okay.
Yeah, presented to city council. Okay, I see no further discussion. Now, Councilmember Severing, if you'd like to voice your vote.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpaz,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pulver,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Now move on to item number 6. Council, this is probably one of the main discussions of the evening. This is ordinance 2024-13. And this is the discussion or action to consider adopting ordinance as mentioned, which relates to adopting the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. We'll first hear from our finance director, Jamie Jones. There are a few updates and a few changes to the budget was proposed. So Jamie, do you want to proceed?
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see here. So on May 14th, the city held a public hearing and passed the 2024-25 tentative budget. And tonight we're looking for council consideration to either or to adopt the final budget and a property tax rate of 0.00194. I don't know if John's passed the property tax sheet yet, but I don't want to discuss that just yet. So if you want, okay, I just want to make sure so I'm going to come back to that. So there changes that were included is we removed the Weber Human Services contribution of the 59,000 and also the one full-time employee equivalent at the senior center. We adjusted the salaries in most of the departments to align with the market analysis that was reviewed by John and Mayor that Mayor just mentioned. We increased the YCC contribution from 8,000 to 15,000. We increased the transfer to CIP fund of 53,904. Originally, that was at 125 and now at 178. And the CIP funds included the ramp grants that were accepted after the tentative budget was adopted, which includes the trail connection at 2700 North and the aquatic center water feature, which includes the transfer from the RDA fund as part of the projects that were identified in that fund. And then we removed the Oaklawn Park Playground. This budget also includes the rate increases. This wasn't a change from the tentative. I just want a reminder. Does include the rate fee increases of the water fund of 373. 288 of that is for operational costs and 85 of that is for future projects and infrastructure, 85 cents. And solid waste is $1.83. That's for a total of 556 monthly increases to the utility bill. So now I want to go back to the property tax rate. There should be a sheet in front of you. And then John, it's also in the folder. If you wanted to put it up on the screen.
Councilmember Pulver has a question.
I did have a question. So put the, because you had chopped the finance person, but now you're putting them back in.
So it wasn't chopped.
Well,
but
yeah,
Based on, so based on how the tentative was set up, it looks like the position was put back into finance. It's just the way that the numbers shook out, but the position was always there.
Okay.
So it is in there to increase the investment there.
Yeah,
but
the position was always there. I don't know how to explain it. Because of moving of seats. And how the money would lay out. So it looks like the position wasn't there, but it was there in the tentative.
Okay.
Okay, so we got these numbers yesterday. So I apologize for the delay, but they were just released yesterday. There was a change in the property values, city as a whole, of 0.65%. So the assessed values on properties. So not even 1% increase in values. The revenue for 2023 was 2.5 million, which we've seen in last year's budget. The county proposed a total of new revenue of 175,000. Now, of that 175,000, approximately 125 of that was initially going to the RDA fund. But because the RDA fund has ended, it now comes back to the general fund. Make sense?
Sure.
So that's part of how the RDA worked, right? Was the city so the city was allocating the RDA funds to the RDA fund, or the RDA property taxes to the RDA fund. And so now that that has ended, it comes back to the general fund. So essentially it was being restricted, if you will, into the RDA fund. Okay. And then the other 50,000 of that is new growth. So the proposed 2024 revenue is the 2.679 million into the general fund. So last year's property tax rate was the 0.00198, and the county proposed rate this year is the 0.00194, which is a decrease of 0.33%. So just slightly it's gone down. So in turn, what that means, if we go to the second graph there, or if we hold the current rate, we do have to go through truth and taxation, but that will give us an additional just about $9,000 if we hold the current rate, which would give us a total revenue of $185-ish thousand. If we accept the county proposed rate, that will give us the 175,958. And then if we increase it 2%, it will increase it about $54,000, or a total of 229,000, and then 3% and 5% there from there. And then at the bottom, the fair market value, the average fair market value in North Ogden City is 522. And then there you can see how the increases in property tax rate will affect each home annually. So like if we adopt the rate, it would subtract $1.15. We had the 2% rate, it would add $6.86. And so on.
Or about 50 cents a month.
Right.
Jimmy, maybe just a point of clarification. In the tentative budget that was approved by the council,
yes,
there was a 3% increase built in revenue wise.
Yes, there was a 3% increase, about 75,000 plus the 50,000 estimated growth. And that 3% of the 75,000 is now 125. So if we increased it another right around 50,000. And so that 50,000, it's actually the 53,000. That extra 53,000 was put into the CPI fund, CIP fund, which is how we increased it to the 178.
So this may be a little refresher to try to make you more confused than I see you are now.
Right?
This is complicated, right?
It is
So,
complicated.
don't feel bad if you're not grasping all the concepts here. We kind of had a good surprise on the $125,000 that came from RDA. This would not result in our citizens paying more money. I want to
Right.
point that out. So the 125,000 would not result in our citizens paying any more money. I think Councilmember Pulver brought up a very good point. And as we discussed last week, the 3% increase just basically maintained where we are. It didn't provide any additional money to repair sidewalks. It didn't include any more money for roads, which we know are not in pristine condition. And so maybe one thing the council could consider, because I think also there's some issues probably contingent that we don't know at this point in time that could come back and hit us. So I'm wondering if the council ought to remember the 3%. That's what kind of was built into the budget. But this money that came in from the RDA, that once again does not involve our citizens paying any more money, should be used to get us seed money to get these sidewalks repaired. And that the money would be, this $125,000 that came in should be used specifically in the CIP fund for sidewalk and road repair. Then the council is faced with, is 3% adequate to handle the contingencies? I think we heard from citizens last week that 5%, that somewhere, but that's your call. You can go with 0, you can go with 3, you can go with 4, you can go with 5. It depends on how you want to approach moving forward in the city. So I just wanted to clarify that the 50,000 is not paid by existing residents. That's people like myself who build a new home, and I will now pay property taxes on that home, in addition to my old home and several others. But so that's not additional money out of our taxpayers' pockets. The 125,000 is not. Your option is you can cut property taxes if you'd like. That's your prerogative. But I do believe that there's needs in the city for that 125,000 that kind of rolled in unexpectedly. But I would ask you to consider, if you decide to do that, that it's used for specific things that we're kind of behind on in the city that allows us to catch up. The 3%, as you recall, basically just allowed us to balance the budget and provide for, some compensation increases. So I don't know if that clarifies it, but I wanted the public to know that the only potential increase out of their pockets would be the 3% that was approved, which is about 75 or 80, what maybe 90 cents a month. Or if you went to 5%, it'd be about $1.50 a month. Or if you went with 4%, it'd be somewhere in between there, like maybe $1.25 a month. So just wanted to kind of put that out to see if you have any questions of Jamie in that regard. I mean, it was nice for that, because I think we were struggling to see how are we going to, and as John mentioned, down in the Green Acres area, we don't have ADA ramps for kids down there who may need those. I don't know if you've taken the opportunity to kind of walk through the city on some of the sidewalks. You can see we do have some issues that need to be repaired. So just a thought for you to consider. Any questions on that? Councilmember Watson?
So would that include sidewalks in properties that are missing sidewalks as well, or just repair?
It's probably just repair, I believe. So if we did that, that would give us about $170,000 to utilize for sidewalks and additional amount for streets, which we know we need. So it wouldn't be new sidewalks at this point in time.
And then I just also was curious, the money that is coming in from RDA that we weren't expecting, that's not associated with the business grants we had planned on using. Okay, just want to make sure.
that was money that came in to build the money to give the grants. But now that stopped, and then it comes into the city in the form of general fund. Does that make sense? It was money that during the period of time the RDA was in, instead of that money coming into the general fund for general purposes, as Jamie mentioned, it went into the RDA, which is restricted in use. Now that that's expired, the restrictions have gone and it comes into the general fund for general use. But I would just say if you decide to do that, that we identify a specific use, that it doesn't come into just general operations in the city. It would flow into CIP and be used for those specific purposes as authorized by the council. Councilmember Watson, go
Thought
ahead.
of another question, sorry.
Uh-huh.
What percentage of our sidewalks that are out of compliance would be fixed with this amount of money?
Well, that's an interesting question. I asked Dave to kind of identify potentially what we think we have out there. Based upon the numbers of miles of sidewalk and the representative sample, we think just repairing the sidewalks is about $500,000 bill. Obviously, we can't swallow that all in 1 year. This would get us some good seed money towards doing that. In discussion with John, he mentioned that there was somewhere, I think he said between 15 and 30 needed ADA ramps down in the Green Acres area, ranging in price, just using attorney math, somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000. If you add those together and divide by 2 and say it'd be about $2,250 per thing, that's about $65,000 just to install ADA compliant ramps.
And that's just the one little neighborhood I was looking at. So there's a lot that it's nice to be in a position where we can look at that and hopefully take that on.
Because it's not going to get any better, right? It's only going to get worse and the longer we push it down the road. But I think it's important that these funds that flow in, the 125,000 from RDA is used for specific purposes, not for general operations. And I would still maintain that even the growth number not be budgeted into general operations, but that is used for one-time expenditures or goes into the general fund, because that is what's going to cause the need for additional police officers. And that prepares us to do that if we're not building that in on ongoing revenue and expense. So I would just remind the council of that also. Councilmember Pulver, I see you have your finger up.
So just going through all of this and trying to think smart ways to, like you said, taking a bite out of the elephant is to use the 5% increase, but also use part of the RDA as well, and to use 200 grand to start working on the sidewalks, and then the remainder to put aside for any adjustments that's needed for salaries, probably mostly for police, but over the year, because we need to maintain what we have. So, I mean, and that's my thoughts anyways on what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a comment? Councilmember Severing.
Thank you, Mayor. I put a lot of thought into this since we were together. And I mentioned last time that I'm kind of the individual who I like to be frugal, but I like to be prepared. So for me, I'm still thinking that we needed to be at least, in my opinion, when we look at a 3% balance equaling 90 cents a month, and I know I'm not taking into account every kind of tax increase across the board.
That's just the average.
Right.
For property.
I personally would like to see, after just a very, very small random sample of participants in the audience, I would like to see us at least 6 to 7%, which would only calculate for $1.80 to $10, to $15, to $20, something like that per month.
Well, let's see.
That's just realtor numbers, not attorney numbers.
It'd probably
Not
be a
account
little over
numbers.
$2 a month.
About how much?
A little over $2 a month.
That's what I was figuring, just a little bit over $2. So for me, I would rather see us at least hit 6%, knowing that that's going to help us get ahead. And that fell into the numbers that were proposed by the participants who were here at our last meeting.
Okay. John, is that
So what we will do as part of this process is next week, when we have our special meeting, because we're not meeting on the 25th because of primary elections, we will bring back an ordinance that sets the ceiling on what you could select at Truth and Taxation. It wouldn't set the floor. So at Truth and Taxation, you could say, oh, we want 2%. What you couldn't do is say, oh, we want 15. So unless you said you might go as high as 15. The trouble is, whatever we say we might go as high as is what gets put in the notice that goes out to the residents. So we like to be cautious with that.
we did learn our lesson on that one time before. So I would hope that, you have some consensus on where you want to be so that we can get a realistic number in there. I would like to add one other thing too, and this was a very brief conversation we had. I know we're all very concerned about the burden that's being placed on citizens whose income is somewhat limited. And so on the water fee, I suggested that maybe what we do is in the fee schedule tonight, we make the adjustment in the base fee, which would comprise the 85 cents, because that's preparing for things we have on the radar that need to be done citywide. And then another $1.44, which is half of the base increase that's needed. The remainder, I would ask, be recovered on a user basis. Those who use would pay, but I hate to put that whole burden on those who have limited income. So I would ask the council to consider that. Then Dave would come back and adjust as you may know, we have a base rate. Then we have a rate per 1,000 gallons, I think up to 6,000. Then we have all the brackets that work their way up. So just another thought for you to consider. I believe some of the discussion I've heard is where appropriate, we need to charge for use, so to speak. And that includes an adjustment that Dave would talk about for those where water's pumped up the hill. An adjustment in the power rate there too. So that would come back as part of the basis. So anyway, what else, Jamie, did you want to mention?
I believe that's all I really had.
What other questions? Mr. Dalpaz?
Most of the revisions to salaries in different departments, what were those related to? Because I noticed that there's a spattering of decreases between judicial, recorder, just all these different line items. What was the majority of those decreases all about since the last time?
So that was looking and evaluating, we go through that job description analysis. We looked at a couple of positions and we're really trying to refine how they compared to the folks we're comparing them against. So there was some refinement there. There was some looking at just time on the job. So one of the things that we've been refining each year is instead of just saying our goal is to get everyone to 50%, but that's after that sufficient time training on the job. And so some people might be at 96% instead of 100. And so we scaled it down to our goal for them this year, and that was part of the savings.
Yep. John, I think the big one was Councilmember Dalpaz, as you'll remember, we had some pretty large retirements last year, about $170,000. There's nowhere near that built into the budget this year, so that would probably show decreases based upon the allocation of the retirement numbers. I think also there's kind of been some reallocations of things. I don't believe in the schedule I saw, there's anyone whose salary is being reduced. Is that correct, John?
Right, yeah, there's no employee who's getting a reduction, and we're sticking with the minimum that the council said they wanted to do for, so everyone will get at least a minimum increase this year.
Okay, that's great.
Does that answer your question, council member?
Yes, and just overall, I do love the idea that any increase that's put in this budget is very specific towards either ADA ramps or sidewalks. That just sounds awesome. So I hope that we, even though, you know, property taxes are all allocated towards public safety in theory, but for that to go into that increase to go into the capital increase or capital improvement fund sounds awesome.
And it does all go, as you mentioned, to public safety. It just requires less use of sales tax funds. That's the other thing I would like to kind of mention in here is I'm a little bit nervous about our aggressiveness in sales tax collections. I believe it's up 150,000. I know historically that's what we've seen, but I know when I talk to people in business, their sales are pretty flat. And so I just want to point out there is some risk there. And Councilmember Dalpaz, I would hope that we can use some of this money for roads. That it would be sidewalks and roads, particularly on the increase above 3%, because as you'll recall, the 3% was primarily used to make salary adjustments, et cetera. So if we take that and assign it all, we wouldn't have any money basically to balance out salaries. So if we could maybe keep in mind that anything above the proposed 3%, and the additional growth, as mentioned by Jamie, would be used for specific purposes. And I would hope one of those purposes would be a contingency fund to make sure that we have a retention strategy in place as needed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions of Jamie? Councilmember Dalpaz?
I'm sorry. I had heard it. I heard it thrown around at one point. This is a couple months ago. I can't remember if it was John or yourself that was mentioning it. But I believe that there's a creative way that you can use RDA funds to pay legislative wages. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if it's right or not, but in theory, you could take, since we serve on the RDA board, we could take $1,000 of our stipend and have it covered by that, and it could decrease some of the need in this budget. I don't know. I just want to throw it out there that it might be something that we could look at.
I know some cities do that. They compensate their council and their RDA
I'm
board.
not saying an increase in our wages. I'm saying to take away
Well,
from the use
That's
from.
okay if you are, because you probably deserve it.
No, I'm not saying it.
You know, it's hard. It's a reality of the situation. I know all of you are serving not for the monetary reward, but also it's not an easy job, and it takes a lot of time. That could be an amendment later on to the RDA budget, I believe, if the council decided so to do that. Personally, I'm not sure we want to get into that because the RDA will ultimately go away, and then you're faced with raising your salaries, right? People don't remember that you reduced them at one point in time. They just remember that you increased them. So just something for consideration. I think that was John's idea. Point that out. Anything else? Any other questions before we have a public hearing? Jamie, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I'm good. Thanks, Mayor.
She's good. Councilmember Watson.
Well, I don't know if this is a question specifically for Jamie or who, but it has been brought up recently about the skate park needing some attention with the behavior and the police attention that's prevalent there right now. And if there is a plan in mind to put some kind of fences or cameras in there, do we need to incorporate that in the budget now? Or is there a way that we can maintain safety at that park?
Yeah, I think we have money in the capital projects fund that we could use that if that's decided. And just a reminder to the council, the reason there's some money flowing into the CIP fund is there are commitments out there that we know have to be made. There's others that we don't know. But as the city grows, we have to be prepared to deal with the infrastructure, what I call soft infrastructure, which is parks, police, those type of things. And so that's one thing, and you don't have to agree, but the previous council said, it is something we need to not just look at from day to day or year to year. We need to be looking out for a period of time. And that's why we have money flowing into the capital projects fund. Someday, Barker Park may even get done. Someday.
And we had decreased that amount this year
To
relative-
125,
What was it before again?
300.
Yeah,
But
that's
this
a
will
little
allow,
concerning for me.
a little bit more flow into that, although it'll be used for sidewalks and streets. But with the additional, it probably goes to really about 175, and the remainder is assigned for sidewalks and streets. So it is diminished a little bit, but also gives us that cushion, not knowing what may happen with sales tax. I think that is become so reliant, and it needs to have some cushion because we just can't nail it down. Other questions? Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna suggest between the capital projects budget minimized and the sales tax risks we're taking to maintain the budget, we previously said an increase of 3%, right?
Right.
And I just remember last year, the council that I wasn't a part of, but the council had other things come up between this time and the truth and taxation, and they weren't able to accomplish what they needed to because they were limited by that ceiling not being high enough. And so I wonder if we should, I'll just throw it out there for discussion. If we did say 4 or 5%, and expecting that it to stay at 3%, but with the sales tax risks and the capital projects being minimized as well, both of those kind of concerning things, and knowing that something might come up between now and August. I don't know. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
I think there was some comment, 5% minimum. Council member Severing talked about 6 or 7%.
Okay.
John told me the mayor is always against property tax increases. But they're necessary. I fully understand.
I just want to play it safe.
I had to
is
get
all I'm saying,
that
so
in
I'm
because
not trying to
John
correct
didn't
anyone's
believe it.
numbers, just trying to play it safe.
But I appreciate John's advice. All right, what other questions may you have before we enter into a public hearing? I'm seeing none. So at this point in time, we will open the public hearing to have a discussion on the fiscal 24-25 year budget as discussed here. Any additional input for the council to consider as they give staff direction to prepare for next week when we set that threshold for the truth and taxation hearing, if that's what you so decide to do. Anyone online, John? I don't see anyone. Mr. Swanson?
That light is really bright. Phil Swanson, North Ogden City. Excellent work on the budget. It's balls in the air, constantly moving. I agree with Councilmember Severing. I think it's a little short-sighted to shoot low and try to, we've got an 11'6" truck and we don't need to build a garage at 11'7". We ought to go to 12, maybe 12.5. I would recommend to council that since you're only setting a maximum ceiling for the decision you'll make next week, that you set that ceiling at 10, maybe 12%, so that you give yourself plenty of room to do what you need to do. And then next week you can come in and say it's 1.5%. Anything below 12 or wherever you set that ceiling will fit the law that you're trying to satisfy tonight. I agree with Councilmember Severing, though, that probably that 6, 7, 8%. We've been, as a city, kicking this get behind or falling behind inflation can for decades. And we're paying the price now. And we need to slowly start getting ahead of that. Again, I would recommend setting that ceiling at 10, maybe 12% for next week. And then next week would encourage you to look at that 5, 6, probably 6 or 7% increase. Nobody likes to pay more in taxes, but I also like nice roads. I also like sidewalks. I also like, good police response. I like and love all the services and frankly, demand the services that come from those funds. And since I demand those services, I ought to be the one paying for them. So thank you, council, for your hard work.
And just one other reminder to the public that the increase in solid waste, a lot of that is just a pass through. There is some increase in operations, but most of that is a pass through from tipping fees and use at the county facility. They're facing the same thing. And just a reminder that we won't be the only one that'll probably be having truth and taxation hearings. So when you look at the burden on citizens, understand there'll be others out there too. But I understand what what Mr. Swanson is saying. 3 years I called him that. It's hard to break the habit. Maybe 4 years, I don't know. But I would caution too that whatever number you put out there as the ceiling is the number that will be spread throughout the world. That's what you're increasing taxes, whether you do or not. Okay. Anyone online like to make a comment? I don't see anyone. Anyone else here like to give input on the city's budget? Sir, step on up.
Not on the budget, sorry.
Okay, well, we'll get to you at the end of the meeting. Stick with us. Stick with us. Okay, then motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Dalpaz. Thank you, Councilmember Watson, for your second. All right, we have a motion and we have a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is closed. Council, now the discussion is a motion to approve an ordinance, which happens to be 2024-13. And this would be adopting a fiscal year budget, final budget. I think we need to define what some of those things are that we're looking for a motion to approve. And then we can kind of get prepared for next week in regards to the rate.
Yeah, so council, just because every city does this a little differently. Some cities, currently we have a tentative budget that is the budget we will operate under until truth and taxation. You could supplement that budget with the budget before you tonight as your motion, with the understanding that we would be going to truth and taxation. So you would essentially call this the
Tentative budget 2.0.
the new tentative budget. Yeah. But
2.0.
the final budget will not be approved
Till after.
until August, assuming you move forward with truth and taxation. So that would essentially, we would decide that next week on when you adopt the official rate we're talking about.
But I think the staff needs some guidance so that they know and we know what we're adopting in the tentative 2.0 budget.
Exactly, Mayor. So if in the motion, it would be helpful to say, we would like this to be the new tentative budget with a proposed tax rate of this for the final budget. And then we'll
We-
bring back the paperwork next time.
And she'll have to calculate the actual number. If you come up with the percent, she can then work through and get us the tax rate. So yes, final budget, based upon the council's guidance tonight on adopting tentative budget 2.0, you can suggest a property tax increase over the 0.00194, which is the certified rate, which would actually result in a decrease in taxes, which would trigger a truth and taxation hearing, which would fall into what John just said. Final budget would be adopted after that meeting and approval by the council. So what we would need now is, if we're going to include the things that were discussed earlier in regards to how we approach the fee for water, or is that going to be in the separate, that'll be a part of the budget, or will that be in the
That'll be the
fee,
consolidated fee schedule next week.
consolidated fee schedule? But, do we want to move forward with the property tax? Do we want to assign that as we discussed? I think those were kind of the changes that were talked about. So from there, what would you like to do? Councilmember Barker?
I'm gonna speak first on this one just because I'm a little, I don't know if the word is concerned. All this weeks leading up to these budget discussions, we've been telling our department heads we need to cut costs, cut everything. And we got down to where we want a 3% rate. Is that correct? And that's the minimum, the minimum. And now tonight we're saying, well, maybe we want to go higher. How come we didn't bring this up before tonight? That's my concern, is we never once said, oh, we're being too aggressive. Now we're saying, let's go higher. I'm okay with the tax rate, but it's got to go somewhere. We can't just say we're going to raise the rate because we want to get to 10 to 12%. And there's the same discussion I had last year when it got brought up. If we're going to raise the rate, where is the money going to go and why do we need to raise it? But then we're also going to tell our department heads, you came with the plan and we didn't like it, so we cut your plan, but now we're going to give more money somewhere else.
Councilmember Barker, could you help me understand where we cut anything out of the
No,
department budgets? I'm not aware that anything was cut out when they came to us.
Well, and we just had discussions on, well, let's take money from the CIP, let's lower it down so that we can get this rate as low as we can, which is where we got down to the 3%. And I'm okay going to 5% because we got a plan of where the money's going. But to say we want to go 10 to 12%, and this is the first we're talking about it, why don't we bring this up in weeks before?
I don't have the answer to that.
I mean, if we would have brought it up when we adopted the tentative budget, we want to go at 10% rate, what would we have said?
Well, I could maybe put some color to that, Councilmember Barker. I think when John went through the salaries sheet, and this is by no way any commitment whatsoever, but I think we've seen some pretty interesting things happen, particularly in the public safety arena. That
Correct.
Frankly, I don't want to get caught not being able to address that issue because, our number one priority is public safety, right? So I think, just my opinion, there's some things that have changed from the earlier discussion. And I think a lot of it has to do with, what's happening in public safety. I think additionally, maybe the council, and I can't speak for them, but the ability to fix some of these things we're behind on, sidewalks and roads. I don't know if you've been getting a lot of the same communications and seeing what's going on in regards to roads. Maybe the council said, it's time to step up and address those issues, but those are some of the things that
then I'm in favor of it. If we're gonna say this is gonna go towards roads, this is going towards salaries, this is going, but I disagree with saying, well, our finance director is saying 3% is what we need, but we don't trust and we want to go higher. That's kind of the interpretation I'm getting, is we don't trust our own staff. If we need more money, say we need more money and where it's gonna go. That's my opinion.
Well, we can ask our staff what they recommend. they're both here. We have our city attorney and our city manager who's responsible for day-to-day operations, and we have Miss Jamie here. But I think, you know, it's been the fact of, and once again, I could be speaking out of turn, but I think they're very concerned about the burden that's being put on the city. And I think before it was kind of discussed in general terms. We just need this to kind of maintain. Now we're saying, hey, it's really time to catch up and move forward on some of these things. I think, you know, to your point, and I agree, that that's why we need to identify what this money's specifically for. And that it doesn't just build into operations and just get sucked up into a big black hole, which isn't the case, but I can let John and Jamie speak for themselves. Mr. Call, would you like to comment? You don't have to, but the question was asked by Councilmember Barker.
I'll beat the same drum I beat every year, although I don't usually say it as directly and loud. My preference is we'd pick a number and do it every year. So 5% every year, and that's the city policy. It would keep us ahead of inflation generally, not the last couple of years, but it's just something that's reasonable and expected and is easy to budget for. You know, and hopefully should avoid the 23% years that, you know, if it eliminated that, that'd be great.
You have a comment, Jamie, you'd like to make? Don't feel obligated, but if you'd like to comment.
You know, with the concern with sales tax, setting a tentative of 10% buys us 2 more months to get information. You know, how we're going to finish out this year. Yeah, we don't have to set it at 10%. It's not concerning right now, but if it becomes a trend where we're trying to build our CPI fund and we keep cutting it and then trying to figure out, having to go back in and reset that plan, you know, sometimes those things can kind of get a little bit frustrating. So, I mean, I understand where the conversation's at. So.
And just to toss out another thing, if you'll recall, the budget was brought here with a deficit of about 500,000, was it, or 3? I can't remember. 543,000 kind of sticks in my mind.
I cannot recall that.
Approximately.
So sorry.
That's what I recall.
I do too.
Approximately. And
And then we whittled it down to about 125 by the time we were done with that conversation, right?
yeah, and so somebody asked, I think the mayor said, okay, what ideas do you have? So I was off 3. What percentage is that? Okay, it's minimal. And so we had a discussion. We're faced with a $545,000 deficit. And so every council member had an opportunity to say, how are we going to fix this, right? Some suggested, well, maybe there's some things we had to look at cutting. I mean, there was a discussion about the doors over on the old Public Works. I mean, so somebody said, Mayor, what's your idea? So I just threw it out for consideration, but I think the council was open to make any discussion they'd like. And I didn't hear anybody at that point in time jump up and down on a big property tax increase, but maybe I was sleeping. I don't know. Councilmember Dalpass?
Just for clarification, in case there's any confusion, I also don't remember anything that we went to a department head and said, we're going to cut this or we're going to do this. I will admit that at the end of one of those meetings, there was a discussion. I raised the concern about the door at Public Works, you know? And so since I raised that concern, I went and checked it out with Dave and he explained it a little bit better for me. And I was able to see it with my own eyes. And so I believe that it now needs to remain in the budget based off of everything that he explained to me. But yeah, I'm just I don't feel like anything was ever cut from a department head that was essential or asked for, but maybe I'm wrong on something.
Well, I think they came knowing that we wanted a budget of needs, not wants, right? And before I forget, Jamie, you heard the YCC ask for $12,000. We've normally given them 8,000. There's 15,000 in the budget. So just so you're aware. If there's anything you want to do there, approve that. I think we probably need to get back to Margaret at some point in time on what we're willing to do. So somebody else have their hand up down here? Councilmember Pulver?
So, and I guess to Councilman Barker's point is the fact that we weren't talking about tax. I mean, we were trying to minimize. Nobody wants to tax, do it every year just cause. And I think the main point that I was trying to, and it came from, and it didn't come out of thin air. It came from the fact that our insurance has gone from 280 in the 21-22 budget to 440 in the 24-25 budget. And that's due to, and I think 1/3 of it is a sidewalk issue. So to me, that was like kind of a smack in the head that's why I've started pushing the sidewalks because, and then, you've had residents and quite a few residents pop up and say, holy cow, look at this, this is a mess. And there's ADA ramp missing all over the place, not just, but if you go up, up the hill, oh yeah, they're fine. But if you go down the hill, oh my goodness, yeah, it's bad. And I think if, especially around parks, et cetera, that if we don't fix those, we're open to liability ginormously. And you could just double that number. And we're, because if you look at it, that's a ginormous increase. And, if you chip away at that, then maybe you're literally paying for yourself almost. So anyway, that's the reason I said sidewalks. And I just want to make sure they get that on record anyway.
Yeah, I was recently at a board meeting and from 2018 to 2024, their insurance premiums had almost tripled. And that's, it's just increases needed plus claims. So nothing's going down, but just speaking very openly, I think there's a little bit of it becomes a little bit timid when you talk about increasing property taxes, right? Because it's the biggest pushback, one of the biggest pushbacks that the council gets. And, nobody likes pushbacks, but I know each one of you have been elected by your constituents to do the right thing for the city. And I think we all recognize we can't be everything to everybody, right? But we need to start moving forward in taking care of the things that we know are not even niceties, they're essential. So anyway, where are we at? Let's talk about what we're going to do with the YCC just to get that out since it's a budget issue. It'll be incorporated in the motion, but what's the?
I recommend we keep it at the 15,000 that we put out there. We're one of the highest users. I know that they did an estimate based off of population, but quite frankly, there are other communities that sounds like they're not going to support it, which sounds crazy to me. I think that is selfish of a community and elected officials to say we will not contribute towards this based off of a percentage. So I recommend that we keep the 15,000.
Councilmember Severine.
Mayor, I agree with Councilman Dalpass on that one.
Okay.
I've had family that has
Looks like-
benefited from, sadly, I've had family benefited by YCC and was a little dismayed that there were those municipalities who were not supportive. And so I'm okay with the 15,000 as well.
Okay. And I'm just wondering, Chief, if there's anything as we actually are giving them more than they're asking for, if there's anything that they could do to help us in our policing that you see that we could ask them, say, we're making this additional contribution. This would be helpful for both of us to win.
Definitely. Their services are immensely in the city that I used to work for. I have a great relationship with Margaret. And we can, as they ask us for everything, we in turn ask them.
services and getting. And that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay.
We need to utilize as the department with the young officers that we have. Get them trained. Assessment, put in how.
And you know, this may sound a little bit harsh, but I believe that, you know, we're making this contribution to help people who are in need. But it's also a little bit irritating for cities who use services for free, including senior centers, senior citizen centers. You know, at some point in time, people need to buck up and pay for the services they're getting. And we're going to pay a little bit more here. So I would ask you to work with Margaret and see if she'll help with that training and things that you have indicated with, because otherwise the resources end up with cities who aren't contributing. So let's use the resources that are available. Okay, that one's, I think there was no other comments other than the guidance giving that whatever the council decides in regards to adjusting the rate, that there's specific identification for those items. I believe we've identified those. Councilmember Watson?
Well, if we put a ceiling on right now, then we might not necessarily describe everything for that ceiling, but we wouldn't approve it at Truth and Taxation unless there is something, right? That we would at that point, by that point, describe every place that we would spend, right?
And it is a good way to get people out to a meeting. is the higher you put it, the more people that will come to the meeting. But yes, that is right. Until the Truth and Taxation hearing, this is like I call it 2.0 guidance budget, under which we will operate with guidance to them. Final budget will take place sometime after we hold the Truth and Taxation hearing. I think by September, what's the deadline we have? September 1st, we have to have our final budget submitted to the state. Else they don't get happy. Okay. So the next issue then would be to try to have a motion or some consensus on what you'd like us to publish or have computed next week for Jamie. Council member Pulver.
So I guess instead of percentage, I want to pick numbers. And so two thoughts I have is whatever it takes to get to 200K for additional sidewalk ADA road work and 100 for contingency for police salaries and sales tax. So a total of 300 based on those two numbers, whatever that magic number is.
You understand though that we have to give a
you have to
rate
give
to
a
the
percentage.
county.
Oh, a cap thing. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and
And that cap, if you want to know what 300 is, if I'm reading this correctly,
12, 13.
the 5% accounts for additional revenue of 310,000. However, 3% of that, or 75,000, was already built into the budget. The tentative budget, we had a 3%.
So this number doesn't have the 75,000 in there.
That's right. So you have to subtract, if you want incremental money of 300, you have to
Yeah.
subtract out the 75. So at 5%, you'd be getting 230,000, 235,000. At 5%, you'd be getting incremental money of 235. So if you want to go to 300, you're who like John, you got your calculator out?
Good heavens.
I don't have mine here.
Then we can just pick it higher. I mean, you're saying just like pick 7% or what do you?
Well, you want 300,000 over and above what was previously approved, if I heard you correctly.
So I'm comfortable because this is not set in stone. I'm comfortable with like a 9% because this is what's going to happen. The headlines can supposedly happen more easily with double-digit numbers.
You want 990,
So
9.99? Is that what you're doing?
I hate to say it that way, but part of the reason that I am okay with being higher than this 5% that is on the list that we're looking at is the biggest unknown to me is 2 more sales tax reports. So there's a chance, I hope it's not a likelihood, but there's a chance that the next 2 reports that come out are, just as bad as the last month that we had. The last month that we looked at was a far decrease from what we've seen usually. And so I hope that it's not going to be that. But the reason that I would want to go in the direction of 8-9% is because that's just such a big unknown. And I can remember I'm starting to get more experience as a council person. And I can remember the first 2 years that I've dealt with this, I always felt like there was always gotchas. There was always gotchas because there's so many needs of the city. So it's not that we're pulling a number out of thin air. It's that we kind of are. We're pulling it out of thin air just in case that sales tax report doesn't come back as expected. And then when we do the truth in taxation, it's listed as a 9% increase. And hopefully everyone's hope, and I guarantee everyone's hope, is that we have a far less increase than we thought we had to.
And I just did a quick calculation. Somebody ought to double check me on it. But at 9%, that gives you 6% incremental over what was built into the budget, correct? Every percent was like $25,000. So that's 150,000. And then we had the 125,000 that came in from the RDA. That would give you incremental of 275 to spend on sidewalks, roads, retention, those things. So did somebody double check me on that? I just did a quick calculation. John, could you?
Yeah, I think that's.
I just took 6 additional percent at 25,000, that's 150. And then we had the RDA of 125, correct?
Yep.
So it gives you 275 to incremental over above what was initially in tentative budget 1.0. And that would be used for the things specifically mentioned. Although I'm still going to throw out the growth factor that was the 50,000 in the original budget should not be into general operations. That should be used for one-time things. It could be used for sidewalks until needed to increase the police force. Just going to throw that out again. Okay. Councilmember Severing.
Well, Mayor, I think I'm probably the senior city councilman.
Age-wise, that's for sure.
I am. And I love the way Councilman Dalpas in his comedy said, we've got to watch out for gotchas. Remember 2 years ago, we had a little bit lighter winter this last winter. The year before, you may remember, we were looking at almost $1 million with 1700 North. As I recall, I could be wrong, but it seems like we were looking.
Ended up at a couple hundred.
Yeah, it ended up being a little less, but I think we were looking at nearly $1 million, right? And then it ended up coming in less. So I really am thinking the same thing as Councilman Dalpas. I mean, I was thinking 6 to 7. I would rather have a threshold that puts us a little bit higher so that we settle a little higher just for those kinds of events. And I think that's where we would be a little derelict in our responsibility if we didn't make some adequate preparations, knowing we've got $500,000 in sidewalks. We're not even taking into account the kind of money that needs to be spent to update roads. So I think we need to be looking at a higher threshold than even what I was hoping for in my first comment.
I just want to throw out that we understand there are gotchas. And that's why we have a floor on our general fund balance of 15%. It's currently at 30 until we transfer over to CIP. And Jamie's waiting to say whether you want that to be at 20% or 25%. So she'll know how much money to transfer over there. But I just want to let you know that, there are reserves out there for unknowns. Just pointing that out, because there are always a few gotchas, no doubt. Okay, what else? Councilmember Watson.
I'm fine with the 9%, knowing that this is a cap that we don't need to stick to at Truth and Taxation. And also knowing that by that time, we will have allocated whatever we want to spend to a specific purpose and not just throwing out a number just for the sake of it.
I think it is good to have that discussion now because, you know, all the decisions of the public are going to be made prior to, their intention will all be made prior to the Truth and Taxation here. They'll arrive at their conclusions. So I think it is good to state that we don't know the exact amounts, but for those things we talked about would be important, I think, to at least reference, if that makes, knowing that there is flexibility, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to help, having been through this for 4 or 5 years. And Councilman Barker, well, he didn't have to worry about Truth and Taxation for 17 years, so. Okay. All right, do we have then a motion?
Christina might add one more thought.
Did you have one more thought?
Well,
Christina?
I'm just also, if we are gonna describe why we are having this cap of 9%, I'm also a little concerned that this 125, that's grateful, we were grateful for it and we weren't expecting it, but having to share that with sidewalks and roads, you never know how that's gonna iron out in the end. If most of it goes to roads, then we're gonna continue to have this problem with sidewalks in the future without a revenue coming in to help pay attention to that. So just another thought about that.
And just as a refresher, there is already 70,000 for sidewalks in the budget, just so you know. And then the other issue will be the transportation utility fee that the council will have to. But I think once you get through the Truth and Taxation, you can kind of identify what the intention is of the council for the use of that money. So another 100,000 in sidewalks would give you about 170. That'd get us caught up maybe a third of the way, depending, but we don't know. That's the problem. Okay.
Jamie, do you know what a tax rate would be for 9%? Have you been thinking about that? Trying to calculate that? If not, I'm sure we can just put in the motion that it's 9%.
Well,
You
are we
can,
adopting it tonight or next week?
Next week.
Yeah,
So
next-
we just need to
Okay.
know
Okay.
if you want it 9% or an amount.
and is it an official, are we doing an official motion at this point? Okay, then no official motion needed, but I say we do 9% for next week and
Like
we,
12 basis points, so you could probably add another 48. So it'd be like a 0.001303 rate approximately, but she'll calculate that.
Yeah, 10% was 1313, but my phone is dying.
Yeah, so about 1304 or
see it.
something like that. I think approximately. But
So-
that's what she'll calculate and bring back. So guidance. We won't be, obviously, what we'll be probably adopting tonight is that we're going to go to a Truth and Taxation. We're going to have a increase, but we won't be approving a final budget. But we'll just be saying we are prepared to operate under tentative budget 2.0, I guess, or lack thereof, until we get through the final Truth and Taxation hearing. Is that what we need to do?
We don't need anything tonight. Next week we'll come back with the same ordinance and the new rate. And then we can adopt it then and go into truth.
Okay.
Decide to go into truth. process.
We won't need to take further discussion then. I think the guidance is come back with what a certified rate would be at a 9% maximum ceiling increase, and then we can go from there.
Thank you.
All right, let's go on to item number 7. And this is to discuss the RDA budget. So I think at this point in time, I'm looking for a motion to recess the city council meeting and convene the RDA meeting. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing.
Second.
Have a second by Councilmember Pulver. All in favor of recessing the city council meeting and entering into the RDA meeting?
Aye.
Please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So at this point in time, if you'd like to make a presentation to the RDA board, Jamie, any adjustments? I know there's the 120 that comes out, but we probably don't need to worry about that tonight.
Nope. So on May 14th, we held public hearing and passed the tentative for the 2024-25 budget. At that time, the budget was presented with the only revenue increase of interest earnings. There are not any RDA property tax collected any longer. So the interest earnings of 50,000 approximately, and then the projects as discussed in various meetings. The only change that we do have is transferring the $222,000 to the CIP fund. And that was for the Aquatic Center water feature, where we were awarded the ramp grant. And so it was to take it from the Aquatic Center project and move it over to the CIP fund. So that's the only change.
So do you need any action tonight or do you?
Yes, we do need to adopt
Yeah, could you?
the final budget and for tonight for the RDA fund.
Okay, could you just once again review the changes that were made to the budget they originally approved tentatively on May 14th?
Yeah, so the only change was to move the 222,000 to the CIP fund.
And do away with the 120,000.
Yeah, so that was adopted in the tentative. But there's no change there since the tentative, but that we already did that.
So I have a question then, if that was adopted then, why wasn't the 125,000 in the?
Because
final
I missed
budget?
it.
Well, nobody's perfect, so. But you're dang close.
Tried.
Okay. All right, so with that, do you have any questions of Jamie?
Man, I'm sorry, I don't understand the decrease of 222 to the CIP. Is it because it's
So
It's taking money from the RDA and putting it in the general fund because money was allocated as part of the RDA program to do that. So she's just actually making the transfer
okay?
at this
All
point in
right.
time.
Thank you.
yeah, we had originally, it was part of the project and then we applied for the ramp grant and was awarded. And so we decided to use the CIP fund to manage that project since the ramp grant comes into the CIP fund.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Excellent. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, is that clear? Then with that, I would open the public hearing on the RDA budget. This will be a final budget,
Yes.
as indicated. So at this point in time, I would open a public hearing for anyone that would like to comment on the RDA budget.
You have one online.
Okay, let's hear from person online. Brenda?
Brenda Ashdown, North Ogden resident. My question is, I remember several months ago, we were on the whiteboards and talked about how much money was in the RDA and how it was going to be spent. I'm curious, did any of those businesses apply for any of the RDA money? And or is all of it going to fix up the swimming pool? And this amount that we're talking about tonight is what's left over?
Council, the letters of intent are due on June 30th, and we have received 6 of them at this point of various ranges and amounts. And we expect to receive more in the next 2-3 weeks. So
How do we know that this is what is the final budget then?
because we have allocated up to a certain amount of money to be used for grants.
If that
Uh,
money is not used and there's some left over, can the rest of that money be put towards sidewalks?
I don't believe RDA money can be used outside of the area, can it, John, or can it?
The city was planning on putting in a request for sidewalks in the RDA area.
It has to
as
be
an
in the
example.
RDA
Yep.
area.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand that.
And then additionally, if the money's not used, I think there's some other ideas that have come up that would probably be considered by the council, and this 222,000 was in the RDA
For the
budget
aquatic center,
for the
yeah.
aquatic center. It was already in there to be used. That was approved in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else while we're in the public hearing? I see no one else at this point in time who would like to make any comments. So I would look for a motion to close the public hearing from the RDA board.
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you, Board Member Dalpas. Thank you, Board Member Pulver. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. So now, let's see, board members, I'd be looking for a motion to approve ordinance RDA 2024-14, which is adopting the RDA fiscal year 2024, 2025 final budget. Board member, do we have a motion?
Mayor, is it ordinance 14 or is it now 13 since we didn't make a motion on the previous one?
It's RDA.
This is,
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Well, it'll be 2000 or 2024-14. We'll just leave 13 unused.
Leave it as a placeholder for next week?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll make a motion that we approve RDA ordinance 2024-14, approving the fiscal year 2024-2025 RDA budget.
okay,
Second that.
we have a second by Board Member Pulver. Any further discussion by any members of the RDA board? Okay, with that then, this will be a roll call vote approving the 24-25 RDA budget. Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpas,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Councilmember Pulver,
Yes.
and Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. I'm now looking for a motion to adjourn the RDA meeting and reconvene the city council meeting. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Pulver and a second by Councilmember Watson. Any further discussion? All in favor of reconvening the city council meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
With that reconvening, we'll now hear from our city manager and attorney, Mr. John Call. He wants to have a discussion regarding Resolution 05-2024, which is regarding adopting the official policy for city sponsorship and events. Mr. Call.
Thank you, Mayor. So council, this is revisiting an item where we're talking about how the city can interact with others on events. And we had expanded it out to other types of things. And in conversations last time, in consulting with the mayor and Councilmember Pulver, I think we've come back with a recommendation to say, hey, we're really focused on events. And we're really focused on distinguishing between the events the city puts money into, which we're calling sponsored events, and then the events that we are just maybe waiving fees and providing some staff time to, and those we're calling partnered events. And so the language that amendments that were in the packet are what's there with a few minor changes. We just had started, we said we're going to call them, make sure everything's called events, that both things are open to the public, and that we added this, that the partnered events, that they need to be a 501c3 or a government entity. That will help be a little bit of a gatekeeper and help with some of the requests. It doesn't eliminate those who are residents or businesses from getting a discount, which is something we already do in the fee schedule. But it does make it so not anyone with an idea can come to the city, that they have to get their ducks in a row. And then instead of saying we will regularly review it, it'll be an annual review at the same time as the budget, which is tonight or this month. And so that's kind of the approach. We took out everything that was supported, and basically have just relied on this language that it would fall into the parameters of the fee schedule as the council adopts by resolution, and you'll be adopting one next week. Currently, those discounts for residents is in the 50% range. And it also includes just nonprofits. So if they don't need anything from the city and they're just going to hold an event, private event, then they get their discount. It does still include the gate or the relief valve. If a group comes in and they don't have time to officially ask the council or be part of the process, that the mayor or city manager could waive the fees for their activity. That might be something to be worth discussing with the council on. Do you want it just to be the mayor? It wouldn't offend me at all. Or if you want it to be the mayor and the city manager have to, or if you want to eliminate entirely and say the only way to get a facility for free is to come to the council. And if you miss the chance, then, not that you couldn't review it at any time during the year, but they would need to come to the council before the event was held. And then we did list the city sponsored events that we have: Cherry Days, Arbor Day, Trunk or Treat, tree lighting, food truck nights, Easter egg hunt, the North Pole, and the Night Out Against Crime. And then for the partners, these are the ones that I put down, which is the Just a Break Foundation. Highlight again, the plan is not to give them money, but they might be using, they'll be using city streets and things without permits, for example, not without permits, without paying. North Ogden Kiwanis, they do the breakfast, and they actually partner on the Easter egg hunt with us now. The Major Brent Taylor Foundation for the Veterans Day or the Veterans Week programs, and then the Northview Senior Citizens. That's the nonprofit that operates the majority of the activities that happen in the senior center. Anyone that we want to add to or take off that list, we should have that conversation now as well.
Probably the Bill Barker Park Committee.
Oh,
Or the 50, yeah. Whatever.
So you had a longer list last time of partners. How come we eliminated those?
So it was, we scaled it back to those who aren't doing events or aren't doing public events. So the people who are still getting some benefits like SWAT soccer and those, they're not seen as getting facilities for free. They're just getting a discounted rate, which is established in the fee schedule. So they fell in that kind of third category. And there's more than just that are now off the list.
So you're just looking for a list of people who do events with us, is what you're saying?
That's the way it's been rewritten, is to make it
So-
more narrow and more clear.
The, where you changed it to, it has to be a 501c3 or a government entity. Would that eliminate then those that are not for profit, like the community band and the men's chorus?
So the community band is technically, well, let's see, we should probably include them on the list as the, under the supported or the partners.
Uh-huh. Because it's an event.
And then we've never made an official decision on the choir.
I would support the choir. I would support these kind of events where it's an open to the public. The general public would benefit from that. I think the men's chorus, a lot of the seniors could attend that at the senior center and benefit from it. So we shouldn't charge them a fee to be able to use that. My opinion.
It seems like the senior center being on this list kind of covers that if they're invited,
But
so
it's not the senior center, it's the Northview, it's the, what did you call it?
The Northview Senior Citizens.
Yeah. So it's not the senior center.
Oh, okay. Okay, then that
And-
changes the way I look at it. Okay.
And it is also a little, the distinction, the community band has typically been supported by the city through the ramp grant application process. They were not awarded an easy grant for this coming year. But they had actually earned themselves some money doing some performances for the Egyptian Theater and others, so they should be able to still buy some music. At this point, the men's chorus hasn't asked us to be that level of connection where we would be not financially, but grant supporting them is maybe the right way to say it. But I know that the community band and the men's chorus are not 501c3s at this point.
Right, so that's where I'm concerned about the wording here. If we say it has to be a 501c or government entity, then we're ruling out some of these not-for-profit groups that could benefit the community.
Yeah. Conversely, you open it up to
Volunteers.
the whole world, which is really difficult to do. I mean, I guess if they're serious about it, they could get not-for-profit status. It's not difficult to get.
So,
And just point out that all those using city facilities, their program still has to be approved by the city since we're using city events. So they would submit what their program is to make sure they qualify. But I understand what you're saying, but man, it opens it up to the whole world.
and in theory, if we were to eliminate that, then anyone could come and ask the council. You wouldn't have to say yes, although legally, anyone in the same category, you should give them all the same response. So if it was performance groups, then in theory, you could maybe make a distinction on whether they charge their members to participate or not. But anyone who didn't charge their members to participate, we would need to say yes to them. That's kind of the way you would do it to treat everyone fairly.
Yeah, so a rock and roll band could come in and say, hey, we want to use the senior center. And if they don't qualify under one of those things, we couldn't stop them, right? We just have to schedule it. Because if we started saying no, then we're kind of discriminating.
Yeah. It's just, and so one thing we could do, we can always add names to the list. And so we could adopt something and then come back with hey, here's a tweak, or we could save it for another meeting. I know that.
Let's get over it.
I'm just saying when you don't have some threshold of entrance, you end up saying yes, no, and then and as John said, you end up having to saying yes to everything.
So just to be clear, the men's course will have to pay for the building if they're not on the list tonight.
As of right now, I guess, yes.
Yeah.
Based off of this. Yeah.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
We're not, I don't think we're trying, I don't know how to put it. I don't think we're trying to be difficult with the men's choir. I think it's more a matter of the concern that it spirals out of control with the next group that asks, because it can have an appearance that we prefer the men's choir, that we're buddy with the men's choir. So yeah, go ahead, use the facility. And I think that's what I feel like we're doing, is we're trying to keep ourselves away from like an appearance that we.
Remember the local motion group that came and wanted to use the amphitheater as their headquarters? And if you say, to John's point, once you start saying yes, you start saying yes to everything, right? Because you can't discriminate. And granted, we want that used as much as possible, but we said basically no, because you make kids pay and you make them try out. So it's really not, open to everybody. So we can surely tweak it, but I just my opinion is you got to have some threshold for entry.
Just another idea here. I personally am fine with the one-time use approved by the mayor or the city manager. And if we decide to say we'll give one-time use to any group and approve their program, let's just say, and then it's not a accommodating to the seniors at the senior center, or it doesn't work out to be the partnership that we hoped it would be at that point, do they not make the list as the partner list? I mean, I don't know. Is that discriminating?
Well, see, right now it's not discriminating because if you're a government entity or you're a 501c3, you're in.
So how do we get the choir to be a government entity?
So that's the point of entry. Now you can always change it, but it's really difficult because then you really don't have the ability to say no. I mean, for instance, John has always said, you know, if the Church of Satan wanted to come,
Yeah, I mean, I get where we're going with this.
you know,
So,
just kind of see
I see what
our
you're
problem.
saying. I do. And I will let it go. Just so I'm understanding right. The community band is a 501c3?
No, but they've been, they've had a connection to the city that's distinct from others.
They've even had a financial connection to the city in the sense that when they were created, the city expended funds to help them with some of their equipment and stuff. So I think that's part of the distinction is that we were committed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
Or am I off?
it's almost like a group that the city helped create, although it's starting to be more like the Trails Committee where we've become less and less involved, and maybe for this purpose, we give them a time frame and say, look, you need to establish a 501c3.
It feels that way. Yeah, it kind of feels like we should
And the-
highly recommend that they go down those steps.
And to the mayor's point, they're not hard to get. It's more about maintaining them than it is about getting them, because the IRS, if you get it revoked, you're in timeout for a couple of years before you can apply again. So, and then just in this conversation, I've also added this, making it really clear that no fees are required for entry to the events. Because there are some performing arts organizations out there that charge fees that are nonprofits. And so we just would want to make it clear that if fees are or if tickets or something are being charged, then they're paying to rent the facility. So I think we could provide them the right tools, and I can point them to websites that'll tell them how to do a 501c3. It's not hard.
All right. So thank you. Another question I have is, don't we have events with the Hunt family and Jared Hadley Real Estate as well?
So those are the sponsors under, Jared Hadley, for example, is a financial sponsor of the Trunk or Treat. And then the Hunt family participates in the North Pole. It's typically volunteers. And, you know, circling back on them, that's a good example where I bring up a Yule Festival or something. If someone else wanted to do a holiday expression, we would say yes to them and give them the same not as much, but comparable amount of time on the stage as any other group that was doing an expression like that.
John, would it mess things up too bad if you put the city band up under city sponsored events? Because in essence, we're sponsoring their concerts, their performances, their use of it.
This point, it wouldn't. I mean, it doesn't say we have to give them money. It just says it could be.
Just to solve the problem. But still encouraging them to get the 501c3.
And then the question would be if the group wanted to participate and become a city sponsored event, they would come to the council for approval. Like the men's chorus or other stuff like that.
So maybe you should change the language, because doesn't it say those under there get resources from the city? Could you put up there may get resources? Because I think the city band was created under the fact the city would not expend resources.
Yeah, we could do. No, city funds may be expended as opposed to are expended.
I have another question. So in the previous document, there were, I had it here. the fire station and the schools. And if they wanted to, I can't remember what else was listed in that section. But anyway, are those events mandatory to be open to the public, or do we want to say that the events may be open to the public?
I think if they're using public facilities, they should be open to the public.
Yeah. I don't see how.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I could see maybe on a field day with the school district, they wouldn't necessarily open it to the public, but they would be using the park. I think though typically our rental fee is $25. So maybe we could do in the fee schedule and say, hey, if a school would like to rent the city park, it's $0. And that would, instead of including them in this group, that would allow them to use it for free.
Aren't they really a quasi-government agency? Don't they qualify under that?
Yeah, but then they would also have to keep their event public. Yeah, so, but I think we can fix it on the fee schedule size, is just say that they get, let's say schools and can use it for free. Yeah.
Could we say government agencies, like if the youth council wanted to use a park or,
Mhm.
yeah, okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
And that's everything I have for you, council. If you have other questions or comments.
So John, do you think that's in a position where the council understands it, it's up there for their review, that we need a resolution adopting this policy, the official policy?
I think we're ready based on the discussions to get something written and in place, because we can tweak it if we need to.
Amend it later as needed.
So Councilmember Severing?
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 05-2024, adopting the official policy for city sponsorships and events.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Do we have?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Pulver. Is there any further comments or discussion before I seek a roll call vote? Seeing none, Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpaz.
Yes.
Councilmember Watson.
Yes.
Councilmember Pulver.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 9, which are council department reports. We'll start with Councilmember Dalpaz in regards to police department report.
I do not have a report tonight. I asked too late, and it's not because Chief Quinney has one foot out the door. It's because I had asked for my report too late, so I will catch up next time.
I understand you're getting a new chief.
Oh, that's my council report. We are getting a new police chief. Thank you. That was very helpful.
And the police golf tournament is on Friday. So, okay.
His retirement's tomorrow.
Yes, and we
2 to
also
4.
have an open house for council, for chief.
Is
Quinney tomorrow.
is the public welcome to that?
Yeah, no charge for use of the building.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Severing, do you have anything you'd like to report on building and planning?
Mayor, I neglected to contact Scott and Nate myself. So I have no report tonight either.
Okay, that's fine. He's been out of town.
Good excuse because he's out.
All right, Councilmember Barker, do you have anything you'd like to report on the Parks Department this evening?
Should I say I didn't contact them so they don't feel bad?
Oh, go ahead.
All right, here's the report from Jamie. Loman View Playground should be complete by this Friday. Pickleball courts are being surfaced and landscaping around both should be completed by Friday as well. And speaking with Dave, they may be doing the parking lot as well. So that's getting real close to being done. They do have their seasonal help in, and then the North Ogden Park bathrooms are closed due to vandalism. They're waiting for parts. And then the heat is starting to show up if you haven't noticed. So there's some stress on the grass with dry spots at various parks, but they're fully aware and they're taking care of them.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker, for
You're
that
welcome.
succinct report. All right. We'll now have public comments to end our meeting. Prior to council and mayor staff reports, comments. Anyone like to make further public comments? Either online, John, if you'd watch, or here in person. Mr. Swanson?
Philip Swanson, sorry to take so much of your time tonight. but the budget's important. I did a little quick calculation. As far back as I can see, council, your stipend has been $500 since 1994 at least, so 30 years. Today, $500 is worth $230 back in 1994. $500 in 1994 is worth just under $1,100 today, the same purchasing power. So you're basically being paid half for a whole lot more work, for more than double, close to triple the population, triple the road miles, triple the budget, triple everything that you're being asked to do. Your stipend hasn't gone up. So as a citizen of this great city and one who understands the work that you put in, I'm suggesting the following. I think in your budget next week, you should, or in the Truth and Taxation, your stipend should be raised to $750. It doesn't quite, bring things to where they were 30 years ago, but it's a step in the right direction. And the mayor's stipend should be raised to $1,250. Take that, do with it as you will. It's not an election year. And even if it was, I think you should do it because of the hard work and frankly, the respect that we as citizens should be showing, not to you as individuals, but to the work that the office you hold puts forth on our behalf. And then with the discussion about the partners and all of that with who's what, policy is what makes good governance. If we don't have a firm policy, then we will devolve into favoritism and to discrimination, because one group will like one and the same group won't like another. And the only way that you avoid favoritism, the good old boys club, and discrimination is to have a firm policy in place. And there will be instances where a great organization like the Men's Chorus doesn't fit the policy, and they know what the rule is, and they have the opportunity and the wherewithal, if they choose, to make themselves qualify for the same benefit that anybody else is. But by having that policy, you remove yourselves from being either in a favoritive or a discriminatory position. You just set the policy, and then all of us that may want to use the facilities then are able to do that as we choose. Again, thank you for your hard work on the budget. It's not over yet. You've got till August, so we'll see you.
Okay, anyone else? Step up, give us your name, and we'll give you 5 more minutes.
Dennis Bingham again. I heard some comment about the recycling. Would somebody please clarify that to me? What has been done or what is being done?
Yeah, we had some big, what do you call them, Dave? Dumpsters over by the old Public Works where people could put recyclable items such as paper and cardboard, but they decided to put about everything else in there but that. So we've moved it now where we can kind of patrol that a little bit better and make sure that they're being utilized. We can dump them more often and take care of them. So we didn't have recycling curb to curb.
Green waste. So it's gonna be.
So it'll be over the green waste facility where people can take their stuff.
I remember when we first started recycling here in North Ogden. I believe I was here when it first started. And I remember that our garbage decreased about 2/3. And I just hate to throw those junk mail and newspapers and cardboard and all that stuff in the garbage. I would vote personally for an increase in charges or taxes, whatever it takes to re-implement that. I don't know, on a house-to-house basis. Just that's throwing that out for your consideration. The next thing I have is, would it be possible for some kind of an ordinance to ask people to, or require people? I realize some people have a lot of property, probably impossible to do that, but to remove the Dyer's Woad from their property. If you pull it in the spring, when the ground is wet, it comes out easily. If you wait till the seeds are black like they are now, it's impossible to do anything about it. Second thing I have is near my home up at 3725 North, there's a ravine. I think it's fed by a pond that comes off of Ben Lomond somewhere. And in that ravine, the city, there were plans. I've seen the plans several times. There's a city property that goes up that ravine, and they graded it originally for a path that went up there. And there was a little section just kitty corner from my property that was intended for a little park in there. The man that owned the property below that planted grass all in that. I wonder if there's any possibility that we could pave that parkway that was graded at one time. Probably at the time I built my home up there about 26 years ago. I think it'd be nice if we could use that property to pave that path up there. It's been graded once. It should. I think that's all I have. Can I get some comment or
Oh,
anything?
your address again? Could you give us your address?
259 East, 3725 North.
3725.
Yes.
Okay. Can't commit to paving it, but we'll have Dave take a look at it and see what you've got. Somebody told me asphalt's gone up 60% in the last couple of years, so it gets fairly expensive these days.
Yes.
The Dyer's Woad, I don't know if most people know this, but the county has a program. It's a noxious weed control program. And if people call that in, they'll come out and kind of assess and do a plan. So it might be.
And you can call them to Weber County Dispatch and they contact the homeowner and they say, clean it up or we're fining you. So that's another option.
So we probably ought to get the word out on that program that's available because it is starting to take over again on the Dyer's Woad. What else can we answer for you, sir?
Possibly we could, in my utility bill from North Ogden City, it'd be easy to put a little flyer in there or something to tell people about the Dyer's Woad problem, and especially next spring, maybe early.
Yeah.
And
maybe
it wouldn't cost any more money, would it? I guess it costs to print it and put it in there.
Someone once told me there's no such thing as a free lunch. So it probably costs a little bit, but probably well worth it in our community. So
Thank
good
you.
points. Come and see us again. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you very
You're
much.
always welcome. Anyone online, John, that would like to comment this evening? I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on. Is there any comments from the council or staff? Jamie, any more further comments? Bryce, Dave, John?
Really quick. Next week, we're talking fee schedule and impact fees. Those will be exciting. One of the changes that was brought up tonight is something Ryan's implemented about tracking ordinances and resolutions. It operates more like the state now, where if something doesn't pass, it'll be marked as not passed as opposed to forgotten in the annals of time. The band did a performance up at the amphitheater on Friday, said it went really well. They used the new audio and lights and it went really good. Thanks in a huge part to Bryce and his efforts to get it up and going. And then we've also seen an uptick in amphitheater rentals, and I think we will bring that back and present it to you at a future meeting on what we're seeing and maybe what's going on in the community. So that's it.
Okay,
Real quick,
Councilmember
yeah,
Pulver?
Bill Barker Park did another event, cleanup, last Saturday. Did pretty good. I mean, filled up the truck as Dave saw. So that's always a good, it's the partnership is working. So anyway.
what I found is the weeds grow faster than we can keep them out of there, but appreciate the effort to get things going. Councilmember Severing?
I just wanted to report back to the council, to citizens. Councilwoman Watson and I have been working diligently at trying to get the amphitheater functioning as well. And so we put out a request on Facebook if anybody had a baby grand piano or grand piano they wanted to donate. And guess what?
You got one?
We got a piano donated.
Good job.
It's going to be. So it'll be delivered on June 18th to the amphitheater
Next week.
next week at, I'm not sure of the time, but it'll be delivered on Tuesday, the 18th.
Right, good work.
So we had some people who were kind enough in the city. I'm sure they wouldn't want me to mention their names, but it did cost it'll cost $1,000 to get that baby here, to get it moved. And we had people kind enough to reach out and say, hey, we'll make a contribution to get it here.
Perfect, good.
So the 18th.
Good work.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have anything. So with that, we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn our meeting this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson. Meeting is adjourned.